Okay, this question is a little bit like a real life, real world context involving speed. So you will take some reading, and if you are the kind who is not sensitive to the units presented in the question, and you don't label your working, it's actually very confusing. But if you are systematic enough, take note of the units. It's actually very simple. So it all lies with this STD formula. Okay, so you might want to get the triangle ready. Okay, and then you might want to organize the information also. So currently we got these two boys taking part in the run. So Timothy is running the first 3 kilometers. Okay, at a certain speed lesser than Anthony. Okay, so it seems like Timothy divide the speed. They divide the race into two portions. Okay, then we got two different speed. Okay, for Timothy. Okay, so the first one will be, okay, so let's look at the information first. So the total race distance is 10 kilometers. That means the two boys will have to cover 10 kilometers. So this will be the distance. And for Anthony, he ran at a constant speed of 1.5 meter per second. So he didn't change his speed. Okay, so at this moment, did you realize that there is a difference in the speed? So there is a difference in there's a difference in units. So Anthony units is given in 1.5 meter per second, but Timothy, we are comparing Timothy's speed, okay, with Anthony in terms of the difference is 1 kilometer per hour. So you should have realized that there is a difference in the units first. That's why in the first part, right, you are asked to convert Anthony's speed, running speed into kilometer per hour. So some of you might have issue. So when we say it's 1.5 meter per second, it is as good as 1.5 meter divided by 1 second. So what you will need to do is convert that 1.5 meter to kilometer. So you got to think in a side column. So how would you convert a 1.5 meter to kilometer? So what was the unit conversion? So if you still remember the units conversion, you got to multiply by 1,000. So you multiply by 1,000, that will give you the, sorry, it's not divide by, it's divide by 1,000. Okay, my mistake. So this part, okay, it should divide by 1,000. Okay, why do I need to divide by 1,000? So every 1 kilometer is 1,000. So 1.5 meter, technically not even, it's a very, very small fraction. So it should be 1.5 divided by 1,000. That will give you kilometer. And then you should also try to convert that 1 second to hour. So how do you convert 1 second to hour? You got to remember that 1 hour is 3,600 seconds. So 1 second is only a fraction of an hour. So you got to convert each of the item to the correct units first. Then you can punch calculator. Okay, so you convert each of the item to the correct units. Then you can punch calculator. So you will be getting 5.4 if you punch calculator. That means you just punch calculator this, divide by this. Then that will be 5.4 kilometer per hour. Okay, so only when you already convert Anthony's speed, then you are able to find out Timothy's speed. Okay, so this information is actually not useful until you already gotten Anthony's speed in km/h. Okay, so if you would like to find the time difference between the two boys, so very simple. What is the time formula? The time formula will be distance over speed. Stay very focused. So you should aim, do a bit of planning first. You should aim to calculate the time by each boys. Then you take the distance, take the difference. So obviously it's very straightforward that you should calculate the time taken by Anthony first, because he ran at a constant speed. So go according to the formula is 10 kilometer, and you should be using 5.4 km/h. So the units must match, kilometer and km/h. So if you do this, and if you put it as a fraction, your units is also in terms of hour. Okay, but then for Timothy, he kind of divided the race into two parts. Okay, so for Timothy, right, he divided into two parts. Okay, so if you cannot comprehend the question, it'll be quite difficult. So there are two parts to it. So the first part is 3 km. The second part is 7 km. The first part, his speed is 1 km/h less than Anthony. So I should use Anthony 5.4 km/h, subtract 1 km/h. So he is doing it at 4.4 km/h. Subsequent, the last the remaining 7 km/h, he is doing it at 8.4 km/h. So make sure you match up all the units. They are consistent. Then you are going to find the time taken by Timothy. Find out how much time he took for 3 km, how much time he took for the 7 km. So for Anthony, for Timothy, he got two parts for the timing. The first 3 km should be 3 km divided by 4.4 km/h. So that is the first part. The second part will be the 7 km divided by the 8.4 km/h. So the first part he's slower, then he buck up on the second part. So you will have a nice fraction. So your fraction should be in hour. So you should be taking a time difference. So you should take a time difference. So you should take a time difference between this and this. Okay, then you convert to the nearest minutes. Okay, so it's pretty easy. If you want to do the time difference, it's just 1 and 2. Just the fraction, subtracting the fraction. So at every stage, right, you should be very aware. You should be very, very aware of the units that you're dealing with. So currently, I am subtracting it in hour. So my answer is also in hour. Then I got to multiply by 60. So you will get 20 point something. So the nearest minutes will be 20 minutes. So you just have to be very aware what units are you dealing with, what formula you're dealing with. Okay, so a lot of people find this question difficult. So even if most people who can cope with part A and part B, you will also find part C difficult. Because part C is an interpretation. It's an interpretation of gradient. So, okay, so you will need to actually understand right on a graph. Okay, so the description is for the first 3 kilometers of Timothy run, the Y kilometer versus T hour. So that means, right, They are going to draw a graph. So they're going to draw a graph based on Timothy first 3 kilometers, and they actually got a straight line. So this is so they are asking for the physical meaning. That means what is the interpretation or what's the significance of gradient. So when we talk about gradient, right? Gradient is a fixed formula. So since set 1, gradient can be rise over run, which I don't usually teach. So I usually teach the part where it is a gradient formula. So let's look at the gradient formula. Then we relate it to the interpretation. So if you look at the formula, right, this is the change in y values. So this is the change in x value. So for gradient interpretation, we always take it as it's a change in the y values divided by the change in x value. So in this case, right, so 22 over 5 is the change in y value over the change in x value. In this case, my x is t. So my change in y, right, is represented by distance. My change in the horizontal axis is given by time, which is in hour. So distance over time is actually a speed. So you translate the change in the y into distance in this situation. In my situation, it represents distance. Okay, the change in t is the change in time. So essentially it represents time. So if you link it back to the formula, distance over time, that is a speed formula. So the physical interpretation is this represents the speed. And it represents the speed in kilometer per hour. Because the distance is in kilometer, the time is in hour. So that's one interpretation. So if you are asked for interpretation of gradient in any real world context, you look at the value, what does the change in y represent? It can represent something else. What does the change in x represent? So based on the representation of the y and x, you actually can tell the meaning of the gradient.